Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Proud sponsors of Real Health with Carl Henry.
Hello and welcome to Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. Folks, for this week's episode, COVID restrictions are beginning to lift. Gyms are getting back up and running in phase 4, and I'm fascinated in terms of how that is going to look in terms of the gym of the future. We're delighted to be joined by Conn McCluskey, CEO of Ireland Active, the National Association for the Leisure, Health and Fitness sector. And he joins us today to tell us more. Conn, welcome to Real Health. How are you?
Great, Carl. Thanks a million for the opportunity to chat today and to talk to your listeners, as you say, about the leisure centre and gym of the future.
So it's been a really difficult time for us as gyms, leisure centres, anywhere that activity and fitness takes place over the course of the last couple of months with terms of closures and job layoffs. And it's been a very challenging time.
Yeah, well, we would have over 350 members in the leisure centre and fitness space, everything from local authority to private gyms and leisure centres. So all of those have been closed since the middle of March with the government announcement. So since then, almost all employment in the sector has ceased. Obviously, recently in phase 2, fitness has restarted again to a small degree outdoors. So there is some employment coming back and some activity coming back there, which is positive. But you are talking about 10,000 people working in the sector, about 1 million people being active each week in the sector, usually between swimming pools, gyms, swimming lessons, that kind of activity. So it's both a huge employment loss to the sector and also a huge physical activity loss to the country in general. So yeah, it's been a very difficult period with facilities closed, with employment lost and physical activity lost as well.
And were you surprised to see gyms and leisure centres and the industry as a whole, originally in the phase 5, now that's phase 4? And when they were announced, were you surprised that that's where we were placed within the restrictions and the easing of the restrictions?
Yeah, I think we would have obviously have liked it to have been in an earlier phase, and we did talk to government about that. I think the key point really is that the sector contributes so much to the fight against COVID-19. So in terms of boosting immunity, being physically active, and I suppose that's one of the positive things to come out of this is the emphasis that government and health authorities have put on physical activity. So it really has shone a light on the sector, and even Sport Ireland research has shown that physical activity has increased in this period. Obviously, people have had time to go walking or exercise. So it's great that physical activity has been given a platform during the closure period. But now as we look to reopen, I think our sector really has a huge part to play.
So Conn, obviously now we're heading towards, we're halfway through the restrictions, we're heading towards phase 3 and then into phase 4. Let's chat about how gyms, leisure centres are going to operate and how that's going to look from a user experience in the future.
Yeah, well, I think like gyms and leisure centres, one of the main benefits of them, unlike many other industries, is that contact tracing is built into it. So pretty much everybody that attends a facility, their details are traced, or, there's pre-booking in place. So I think very much in the future, you'll pre-book your slot in advance so that people have your details. You're able to fill out a pre-activity questionnaire to make sure that you're healthy, in terms of COVID or other, ailments that you may have. So before you even get to the facility, you'll be booking online, filling out questionnaires. And then when you arrive, like other businesses, there will be hand gels and sanitation in place as you get to the facility. Then if you've booked online and you have, say, a swipe card, you can enter in without any contact. And really, I think the experience is to try and remove as much physical contact and surface contact within the facility. So I know facilities have been looking at all those touch points, trying to remove as many as possible, whether it's leaving doors open or closing certain parts of the facility. And then into the gym area, once, let's say, you go on a treadmill and you're exercising, that you'd be asked to clean it before and after. And then even just attending the facility, that you would come dressed, rather than, trying to reduce the impact in terms of changing rooms and showers, that you come ready for exercise and then, shower before and after you attend, whether it's for the pool or the gym.
So does that mean that in terms of if you go in as a user, that the changing rooms are shut down and showers are shut down, or will they have some availability?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think it's really about reducing the impact. So what we've seen internationally is that you have to build social distancing into those areas so that there's at least 2 meters in between people, or even more. So you might see certain lockers closed down at times, and certain restrictions on capacities for changing rooms. Obviously, changing villages where you have cubicles are beneficial because that's very contained. So it's really just a more controlled environment in terms of your movement through it, and touch points, and making sure that everything is clean and hygienic. A lot of facilities would have had this anyway, so really it's about improving it and increasing it in preparation for people coming back in. And I suppose the other thing is to make sure that it is still an enjoyable and social environment. That it doesn't become like a medical facility, that it still is, has that social element. People are going for exercise, group classes, and so on. So, I think that's something that has been missing in the lockdown, is that social element, to going to the gym or going to a pool, that I think will come back, and I think, people have asked the question, will people move to online and stick with that? I think that, human beings are social animals and will look to go back to facilities and meet with people. And, it is that community focus for a lot of people, and their local gym or leisure centre to go back to.
You're listening to Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. Okay, so in an ideal world, I suppose we're looking for people to go, dressed, ready for your workout. You'll swipe in contactless. The gym or the facility will have your details on an electronic record in case for contact tracing is required. Once you're into the gym environment itself, do facilities have to keep the 2 meter distancing in place with regards to treadmills, cross trainers, benches, weights, all of that kind of stuff? And is there a guideline in terms of how many people should be in a certain space?
Well, that's what we're working with government on at the minute. So the current social distancing guidelines are 2 meters. So that's what we're working off at the minute. There is obviously conversations around that perhaps changing across the phases or into the future. So that would obviously be beneficial for the sector in terms of having more capacity in facilities. But as of now, and we see it internationally, you're working on a social distance of 2 meter, which might be 4 square meters per person in exercise spaces. Like you mentioned, you've either 2 meters in between pieces of equipment, or you might close, if treadmills are close together, you close down one, do every second one. So it's really about building that social distancing into the exercise experience. Obviously, from an operator's point of view, trying to minimize the impact in terms of the commercial aspect of it, which is going to be a real challenge, because we've seen internationally when facilities reopen, capacity can be down at 50%. When people come back to the gym, it can be, in or around that as well. So it's really about building confidence for the consumer, for the public, that the environment is safe and healthy, and then building it up over time as people get used to the new environment.
And in terms for the mainly, I suppose for the bigger operators and the bigger element of industry, do you think from a government perspective that they're going to require aid in some way, shape, or form from government, be that in terms of VAT reductions or tax incentives, or movement incentives maybe for memberships or something like that, to combat the fact that maybe 50% won't of their client base won't be able to go?
Yeah, I think, look, we would have submitted to government a number of times around these supports. Obviously, supports that have been there are welcome, like the wage subsidy scheme, the pandemic payment, and it is welcome. It's been extended to the end of August, but we would feel that's going to be needed for the period of social distancing, really, because if your income is down 50%, you need something to fill that gap. So whether it's the wage subsidy scheme, you mentioned VAT rates, so it's currently at 9% for sports facilities. We'd like to see that, put down to 0% for the period of this, similar to the hospitality sector have been looking at. There's also, operational costs. So, for example, swimming pools have been closed for the last 3 months, and we're looking at another month or two. You have to keep that pool operating and turning over, and there's a significant cost of that. It can be as much as $5,000 a month. So facilities are having to cover those costs, whether it's insurance, rents. So we feel that supports around operational costs, VAT rates, the wage subsidy scheme, are going to be needed to make facilities viable into the future.
And in terms of facilities that have got pools, saunas, steam rooms, what are the recommendations in terms of the guidelines for those?
I think probably the industry, in an initial opening, will restrict those. So it may be that they remain closed in the initial opening, and then over time, as public health advice evolves, that they can reopen. I think the steam rooms are probably a particular area of concern. Sauna is slightly different because it's the dry heat, but I think the main thing is a lot of those areas can be quite tight, and maintaining the 2 meter social distancing in there is difficult to do. So it may be that it's a very restricted capacity is in there, and you have to clean in between and allow adequate ventilation because obviously you don't want static air in these spaces building up. So certainly I would say that area has been very restricted in any reopening.
Okay. And one of the things you touched on there, so we haven't chatted about it yet, is that element of, deep cleaning in between usage. I know I've read myself and lots of international guidelines, and obviously similar with Ireland Active in terms of cleaning on a regular basis, and almost a shift-like component to going to a gym or going to a facility where you might go in maybe in hour shifts, and then the place is shut down for half an hour for a deep clean, and there's a second shift of an hour. Is that how you're expecting gyms and facilities to reopen?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're probably, like you're saying, you're going to have time slots that allow people to come in, exercise, and then leave without crossing over with the next group coming in. And that gap in between also allows cleaning in between sessions. So I think very much it's going to be a time slot scenario with pre-booking and cleaning in between. So it's really like ensuring for the consumer, the public, that things are done properly, that it's clean, and then it's very controlled in terms of access. It also may mean that, certain classes have to reduce in time. So where it used to be a 45-minute class, might now be a half-hour class. And then also group classes may be reduced in size because of the social distancing measures. So, I think very much it probably will be a time slot scenario. There will be cleaning built into it, and then that allows a lack of gathering in between sessions as well.
I've seen already with the phase 2 reopening, lots of gyms and leisure centres being very inventive in a good way in terms of how they've managed to get their classes back open, such as outdoor in car parks, in covered kind of awning style in car parks. And that may be something in terms of from a classes perspective we may see into the future, because obviously it's a bigger space. They can get that socially distant 2 meters within the class and get that big class in a bigger space than they may have it inside. So the whole gym experience may change.
Yeah, certainly a number of our members are either running those outdoor classes or else, perhaps looking to, tents that are open but covered into the future, because really, if you're losing the capacity indoors, outdoors allows you to do that extra capacity and run classes. And even, I suppose, in phase 2, where it's outdoors in limited numbers, it allows you to start reintegrating staff, to start getting your members back engaged and active with you. So, I think outdoor and then also virtual is probably going to be a kind of hybrid model in the future of membership. So you're obviously as well going to have vulnerable users who may not be able to, return initially. So you may have to have a virtual offering for them, so that allows them to exercise from home or else come in dedicated hours. I think it's going to be a mixture of virtual, outdoors, and indoors.
Okay, so we've covered, I suppose, a traditional gym, larger scale gyms, leisure centres, pools, saunas, all of that. I want to have a quick chat now about, I suppose, the smaller operators, of which there are, hundreds around the country, small personal training studios. In terms of guidelines for those, are they expected to conform to the same guidelines that we've chatted about so far in terms of how the member enters the gym area, the electronic membership tracking and all of that, or are there different guidelines for them?
No, I think that the same guidelines will apply across the industry. I think social distancing is going to be the same no matter what industry or section within the industry you're in. So I think the same principles apply in terms of contact tracing, social distancing, hygiene measures, cleaning measures, gaps in between sessions. So it'll really be an industry-wide approach rather than sectors within the industry. So I wouldn't see that being any different really to between a large or a smaller facility. Different types of facilities might find it easier to implement than others, but really it probably will be a sector-wide approach.
Okay, fantastic. One of the with having you on, I've been looking forward to asking this question because I just want to see what the answer is. Even in now that phase 2 is kicked off, as soon as the government announced the guidelines, I've seen lots of facilities reopen as personal training studios and stuff like that. And I suppose my question really is about adherence to the guidelines for. If we're expecting everyone to adhere to them, I know we as a business have adhered left, right, and centre. We're very much behind what you guys do, but obviously that within every industry, you have people who don't adhere. Is there a governing body who will assess that? Will you be required to get a certificate of opening to say that you've got approval for how you're adhering to the guidelines, or how does that look?
I think government have been very clear in terms of the guidance they've given on phase 2. It's outdoor fitness, and they've specifically mentioned that indoor sport and fitness is not in this phase. So I think for a start, that's pretty clear. In terms of the policing of it, my understanding is that the Health and Safety Authority are the body that are tasked with monitoring workplaces, and I know they have closed down certain businesses who haven't adhered to the guidance or government guidance. So I think really the HSA will look after the policing of it. But like any sector, I think, it really is up to the sector to put itself forward in the right way, to adhere to government guidance. If we want government to trust the sector and trust that we're going to do things right, we have to do it right. So we'd very much advocate for people to adhere with the government guidance, follow it clearly. And I think, like we're saying in phase 2, it's pretty clear it's outdoor fitness for now.
And of course, there will be huge responsibility, I think, on the consumer as a consumer who's going to a gym. That if your gym or leisure centre aren't following the guidelines, it's important that you be a consumer and voice your concern or voice your opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've seen this across this pandemic period that the consumer really will dictate, or the public will dictate, how people behave, and it is, I suppose, social policing, for want of a better word. Has been in place to make sure people are doing the right things. And, if businesses aren't doing it, we know in the world of social media that can be very quickly pointed out. So I think people need to be very careful. Like, we are still in a pandemic situation. Public health has to be the first thing we're thinking about. We're only just out of phase 1. We're moving into phase 2. I think the worst thing for any business, particularly the sector, would be having to close down again, in later phases. So I think we need to take it cautiously to begin with, for businesses to start to reopen, do it carefully, and then hopefully we'll be able to live with the virus alongside it until either a treatment or a vaccine is found, because it looks like we're probably going to have to live alongside it for 12 to 18 months.
As someone who's very passionate about the industry in terms of what we do, I just want to say thank you, A, for joining us. It's great to have you on the podcast. B, to say thank you for all the work that you've done so far as a group and as an organisation. We've got a fantastic group who are trying to get gyms reopened and who've been working with government to make that happen. And it's fantastic to see. If people, either gym owners or a member of the public, want to find out more about what you guys do as an organisation, where can they find out more?
And well, firstly, to say thanks to you, Carl, for, I suppose, putting this piece forward and allow us to speak to your listeners. And if people want to find out more information, they can go to our website, irelandactive.ie. We also run the Register of Exercise Professionals, which you yourself are a proud member of, and people can go and find out the register at repsireland.ie. So they're the two main websites we would operate, and people can find out more information there.
Fantastic. And final question, in terms of guidelines before phase 4 kicks in, when can we expect, I suppose, the final publishing of the guidelines for the gyms and for the industry?
Well, we'll be working with the expert group in the Department of Sport over the coming weeks. So we would hope to have something, a few weeks in advance of reopening. We've seen today, I think the guidance has come out for the restaurant sector for phase 3. So that allows, 2 to 3 weeks lead in. for guidelines to be in place. So we would expect a similar kind of timeline.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we look forward to the guidelines and to promoting them for you as well. We're fully behind what you guys are doing. So, Conn McCluskey, thank you so much for joining us on Real Health today. Much appreciated. Have a fantastic day, and thank you again for joining us, folks. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. A fascinating insight into how gyms and gym usage is going to look in the future. We've got a fantastic team in Ireland's Active doing a great job, and watch out for those guidelines as they will appear a couple of weeks before Phase 4 kicks in. As ever, you know where we are. We're Real Health at independent.ie, at Carl Henry PT on Twitter and on Instagram. And as ever, we'll see you next week with more Real Health. Have a great day.
Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Proud sponsors of Real Health with Carl Henry.